Hello, and welcome back to the MCAT grind. Today we have Psychology Chapter 1 for Biology and Behavior. So this is a pretty condensed version for a comprehensive amount of content. However, I've summarized it into one big table here that should be able to encapsulate most of the content here. So, starting with the nervous system's outline, we have the central nervous system, CNS, versus peripheral nervous system, PNS. The central nervous system, think of it structure-wise, is just your brain and your spinal cord. Now, anything outside of that, extending nerves away from those, include your peripheral. Think about peripheral, the name on the side. So that includes your cranial nerves as well as any of your body's nerves. Right, cranial nerves, they extend out from your brain, but they're not part of the CNS and is part of the PNS instead. The peripheral nervous system is further divided into somatic, which is your sensory information nerves, as well as your motor information nerves. Right, you can receive feelings, and you can also output motor skills, and that's all in somatic division of the peripheral nerves. You also have the autonomic nerves, which are responsible for the parasympathetic versus the sympathetic. And there are the two different phases, and it's important to know that autonomic is just automatic, right, by itself. You don't have conscious control of when you're going to suddenly have a quick fight or flight response. Your digestion is automatically regulated. Parasympathetic, you can think about paralyzed. You want to relax and you don't want to move that much. Where sympathetic, you're on the run. You're getting ready to take a really stressful test. That's all in sympathetic. So hence, in parasympathetic, we have rest and digest state. Your saliva is being produced, you have constricted pupil, and you're relaxed, you're breathing, and you're just chilling. In sympathetic, though, you have your fight or flight response, and it's opposite. Your saliva is halted, your digestion is halted, you start producing more sugar in your blood through glycogenolysis, and your breath starts to go up and your pupil dilate, right? Think about a cat, like their eyes go really wide when they're on a hunt. Your sensory neurons, as I mentioned earlier, for somatic, they go up the brainstem from like your limbs and stuff, they go up and travel up. For your motor neurons, they travel down from your brain to your spinal cord, and so you can do all these movements. Your interneuron actually is in your spinal cord, so that when your sensory information travels up to your spinal cord, even before it reaches the brain, you can relay it back to a motor neuron right away. That's how we get the reflexes. Think about getting hit in your shin with a scooter, right? Even before your brain processes the pain, your leg jerks away. That's how reflexes typically happen through interneurons. Now we have quite a bit of neurotransmitters here. Acetylcholine is responsible for muscle movement of the muscle, and that is occurring in both somatic and the autonomic divisions of peripheral nervous system. We have epinephrine, specifically for the fight or flight response. Dopamine smooths the muscle movement, make it nice and smooth, right? And you can think of several older individuals. They are not able to do these fine movements, and their heads start jittering because they lack dopamine. And serotonin is for mood. And you can say, I need my boost of serotonin today just to get happy. You have your GABA, which inhibits lots of other functions, especially in your brain. Glutamate excites those functions. So GABA, inhibit, glutamate, excite. You have your endorphin, which acts as a natural painkiller, right? Think about morphine. Alright, next we have our brain structure. This is the best I was able to organize this. You have your forebrain, your midbrain, and hindbrain, which includes this bit. Your forebrain includes your cerebral cortex, so that's your frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and temporal lobe in it. And forebrain also includes the other parts in your front. So that includes the thalamus, hypothalamus, basal ganglia, and limbic system. For your cerebral cortex, you can think about it as like a big brain. It's like the huge part. And the frontal lobe is in the front, right? This is facing towards the front. It has executive function, judgment, motor, and speech production, also known as the Broca's area. When you think of like doing all these judgments, it's all part of your frontal lobe. And motor movement, also part of it. So it's pretty much like the big one here. The parietal lobe specifically is for sensory information as well as space processing. And you can see that there's sensory parts over here, and it's very close to the motor part of the frontal lobe over here. Occipital lobe in the back is for visual, which is counterintuitive when you think visual should be in the front, but you can see that later. There's a sensory relay all the way to the back, to the occipital lobe. The temporal lobe is for hearing. That makes sense because your ears are on your side. It's for your hearing, speech perception, right? Not production. They perceive speech, and then they can translate that and link that into production if you need to through articulate facilicus, if I remember correctly. But I don't think that will come up, but it's just a link between the perception to the production. The perception area specifically is called Wernicke's area. For your next, you have your thalamus. Thalamus is somewhere in the middle here, and you can think of it as a simple switchboard for your light. Think about your switchboard in your house, and where they can switch on the light or switch it off. That just relays sensory information coming in to the different parts of the brain. Your hypothalamus is just below the thalamus. Hypo, right, means below, and it is probably the most important in terms of regulating like everyday functions, like homeostasis. It controls hunger, or where you're hungry, or you're feeling satiated, or you're wanting to go fight or flight. Everything regarding homeostasis is controlled by hypothalamus, and that triggers a lot of other glandal functions, specifically the pituitary gland, which there will be a whole chapter dedicated to it. Basal ganglia is responsible for steadying motor functions. You might think that that's kind of similar to how we have the cerebellum. Oh, no, we haven't gone to that yet. But remember how dopamine has smooth movement. That's right, dopamine acts in the basal ganglia to help steady motor movements and functions. In the limbic system, we have amygdala, septonuclei, and hippocampus. The limbic system is all three of them collectively together, and amygdala controls mostly of anger and fear. So there was a case of Phineas Gage. He was like a worker, and suddenly there was an incident where a steel pipe pierced through his brain and destroyed his amygdala. He used to be like an angry individual, and after the thing, his amygdala was destroyed, so he was no longer angry and appeared very calm. Septonuclei inside the limbic system is for your reward. So just by stimulating a little bit, you get super addicted to it, to the reward. So that's part of your addiction system. So a lot of drugs and alcohol and gambling all kind of triggers this firing of septonuclei neurons, and triggers addiction. Hippocampus is for your memory. It's called hippocampus because it kind of looks like a seahorse. So it traces along like, and it's like really good for just retaining memory and long-term ones too. Your midbrain consists of two simple structures. Your superior colliculi, which is for your visual reception. It transfers that and relay it to your occipital lobe, it will go through the thalamus first before traveling through superior colliculi. Then, superior colliculi also helps your eye focus when you're moving your eye around, right? When you're standing here, you're moving around, your eye can focus on one spot. That's your superior colliculi doing the trick. Your inferior colliculi, think about just below. Below your eyes are your ears. Your ears on your side, they respond to sudden loud noises and receive audio perception as well. So these are all on top of thalamus relaying the sensory information. Your hindbrain consists of your medulla oblongata, which is unconscious control, which is including breathing, heartbeat. You don't want to consciously control, okay, breathe, right? That's what happens if you destroy your medulla oblongata. You have to do that over and over again consciously. Your cerebellum is for your posture and coordinate your movement. Is slightly different from basal ganglia, right? Because cerebellum coordinates the movement. Think about if basal ganglia is make sure your movement is nice and smooth, cerebellum just makes the whole thing actually happen, because if you can't coordinate, my right arm go up, my left arm go down, you can't play the drums really well. For pons is your bridge. It's a simple bridge between the hindbrain and to the rest of the system, your cortex, and to make sure that sensory information is relayed properly. Additional information, I would presume that there are several developmental stages to these. So that includes from your very on, your zygote, you will have to form specific parts of the brain. So there are ectoderms, mesoderm, and endoderms, but those will tend to come up on the MCAT less from my experience. So you mostly will just have to remember that the brain and your outer skin is from, and all the neurons in there are from the ectoderm, derived from the ectoderm. Okay, and that's it for biology and behavior. I'll see you in the next episode.